Marcus Chen is 37. He bought a two-bedroom house outside Austin, Texas in late 2021. Mortgage rate, 2.9%. 4 years later, 2 kids, 1 shared bedroom, a wife with a new job across the city, and a neighborhood they've been watching for 18 months. More space, good schools, a yard. Marcus has run the numbers 22 times. 22 times. He knows exactly what it would cost to sell and buy something that fits where his life actually is. Every time he opens that spreadsheet, he closes it. They're not moving. Marcus would tell you it's a financial decision. The behavioral economists would tell you something else entirely. Welcome to Mind Over Money from 10-Minute Money Mindset. This week, the Pulse covered the housing market, the 9-month high in mortgage rates, and the generation of Americans who can't get in. Today we go one layer deeper, because the data shows that a lot of people who could move aren't moving, and the reason has almost nothing to do with math. Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize explaining why. Let's get into it. This week, the psychology of the lock-in effect and the cognitive bias that's quietly shaping one of the largest financial decisions millions of Americans are making right now. Here's the state of the market. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate hit 6.51% this week, the highest it's been since last August. More than 60% of existing mortgages in the United States carry rates below 4.5. The Federal Housing Finance Agency found that for every 1 percentage point gap between market and existing rates, the probability of a homeowner selling drops by 18.1%. And a Bankrate survey found that 54% of American homeowners would not sell their home at any mortgage rate, not any rate. The math explains some of this, but here's the thing. Marcus has done the math. He's done it 22 times. The math is not the problem, so what is? Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky publish a paper that will eventually win the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. They call it prospect theory. And here is the central finding that changed how behavioral economists think about every financial decision humans make. Losses feel roughly twice as powerful as equivalent gains. Think about what that means. When you stand to gain $100, you feel a certain level of anticipation. When you stand to lose $100, you feel something approximately twice as intense in the opposite direction. This isn't a personality type. It isn't irrationality in the way we usually use that word. It is documented, reproducible, consistent, how the human brain processes loss. Now run that through Marcus's situation. His brain has already made a decision about that 2.9% rate. It isn't a number on a loan document anymore. It's something he owns, something he has, something that, if he sells, he permanently gives up. The higher monthly payment on a new loan isn't experienced as a cost in some neutral accounting sense. It's experienced as a loss, an ongoing, monthly, forever loss. That is a fundamentally different emotional calculation than the spreadsheet suggests. There's a related mechanism that makes this even harder to escape. Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017 for documenting what he called the endowment effect. We assign higher value to things simply because we own them. Once something is ours, releasing it requires more than its equivalent value in return. Because giving up something we own activates the same loss processing circuitry Kahneman identified. Marcus doesn't just have a 2.9% mortgage rate. His brain has categorized it as a possession. Releasing it isn't a transaction, it's a forfeiture. And this is where it gets interesting. The Bankrate survey that found 54% of homeowners won't sell at any rate. That isn't primarily a data point about interest rates. It's a data point about Kahneman, about what happens when a psychological anchor is set at the exact moment rates hit their historic low, and the entire world changes around it. Here's something worth understanding about where this pattern comes from. The lock-in effect isn't new. Economists first identified it in the context of capital gains taxes. People holding assets they'd otherwise sell, purely to avoid locking in a loss on paper. The emotional cost of realizing a loss overrides the rational calculation consistently across populations, across decades. With mortgage rates, the mechanism is identical. The asset is the rate. The cost of releasing it is the higher monthly payment. And the behavioral response, as measured by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, is to hold. Now here's the part that most people don't think about. Marcus isn't just making a personal financial decision. His choice, and the choices of millions of people like him, are creating consequences for people who have nothing to do with his spreadsheet. When Marcus doesn't list his house, that two-bedroom starter home doesn't come to market. The couple in their mid-30s who've been renting and saving, looking for exactly that home in exactly that neighborhood, they don't get to bid. Inventory stays thin. Prices stay elevated. The national median age for first-time buyers nudges a little higher. The Federal Housing Finance Agency estimates that between mid-2022 and mid-2024, the lock-in effect collectively prevented 1.72 million home sales. Each one is a house that stayed off the market. Each reduction in inventory pushed prices up. The agency puts that price effect at 7%. 7%, directly attributable to people not selling. Loss aversion in one household. Affordability consequences across an entire market. That is the scale at which this is operating. Marcus Chen has run the numbers 22 times. He knows the move would give his kids their own rooms. He knows his wife's commute would improve. He knows the schools. He knows all of it. But every time he opens that spreadsheet, the 2.9% rate is right there. It represents a decision he got exactly right, at exactly the right moment. By luck, or timing, or probably both. And the idea of releasing it doesn't feel like a financial decision. It feels like conceding something that can never come back. He'll tell you he's waiting for rates to come down a little more, maybe 5.5, maybe 5, maybe then. Here's what behavioral researchers who study this pattern consistently find. For people in Marcus's position, there is often no rate at which the math feels right enough. Because the problem isn't the math. The math has been done. The problem is the framing. The loss isn't the higher monthly payment. The loss is the 2.9% rate. And losses of this kind don't diminish with time. They calcify. The reframe that behavioral economists suggest, and this is the piece that actually changes things, is not to do the math again. It's to change the question entirely. Instead of asking what you'd lose by moving, ask what staying is costing you. Because staying has a cost too. It just doesn't arrive pre-labeled as a loss, so the brain doesn't process it with the same emotional force. The larger house your family needs, the commute, the kids sharing a room, the equity not being built in a home better matched to where your life actually is right now. Those costs are real, they're ongoing, but they weren't acquired the way the 2.9% rate was acquired, so the brain doesn't assign them the same protective weight. Loss aversion isn't a character flaw. It isn't a failure of intelligence. It's a feature of human cognition that kept our ancestors from giving up resources they needed to survive. The problem is, it wasn't calibrated for a housing market where a rate from 2021 functions as a permanent psychological anchor on every decision that follows. Naming the bias doesn't remove it. Marcus will probably still feel that pull the next time he opens the spreadsheet. But naming it changes the conversation you have with yourself when you open it for the 23rd time. This Monday on The Pulse, the week's most important financial story. Reported straight, no frameworks, no solutions, just the truth of what is happening and why it matters. Subscribe so you don't miss it.